So Sony just released a new camera that's basically the a7S III minus the EVF, but they're charging you $400 more for it. What? Alright, so just this morning Sony launched the FX3 and it is extremely similar to the a7S III. So similar in fact that let's just get over the similarities and differences right now. They're basically exactly the same camera. The only difference is that the Sony a7S III records dual channel audio at 16-bit and the FX3 records 4 channels at 24-bit. That's it. Everything else is identical in terms of specs. Now I know that some people will say that the FX3 has S-Cinetone, but the Sony a7S III actually got a software update and now it also supports S-Cinetone. So on paper, they're practically the exact same camera. Now you might be thinking that why exactly is Sony releasing basically the a7S III in a different body? Well, in my opinion, it's actually a very smart choice because what they're doing is that they're basically creating the A7C equivalent of their cinema line. Let me explain. Basically, the A7C was like an A7 III but in a smaller body. It was a really compact full-frame camera. It was kind of meant to be a replacement to the A7 III, but it wasn't quite because the A7 III still has that big EVF and the A7C had that really small one kind of jammed in the corner. So it was more of like a B camera to the A7 III or the a7S III. They just made it really small, really compact, so it's easier to carry, like a perfect B camera. Now they're basically doing the same thing with their cinema line. Now if you have something like the FX6 or one of their other cinema cameras, you basically have the smaller version of that. That's why you see that the color is not black, it's like the grayish color to kind of match with the cinema cameras. The ergonomics, it's a lot boxier and it's got the flip screen, it's got a top handle, it's got XLR inputs, and it's also got 5 quarter 20 mount options all around the body. All of that stuff just kind of adds to the experience so you feel like you're actually using a cinema camera. I know it's got the exact same specs as the a7S III, but it's not supposed to compete with that camera directly, if you know what I mean. For example, if there's somebody out there who has already got one of the Sony cinema cameras, they're not necessarily going to want to switch from that to something like the a7S III because the ergonomics are just so different, the button layout, everything about it. They're probably used to something like the top handle. So all of that stuff really adds up. And instead of adding a cage around it and building it up, now you just have another option by Sony that kind of gives you the feel of a cinema camera in a much smaller size. It can very easily be used like a crash cam or like a camera for your drone just because it's so small. Also, I would like to mention the 2 things that I personally feel this camera is missing, and that would be 1, it doesn't shoot in 8K. I mean, it would have been nice, you know, since they just released the A1, it would have been nice to see, you know, their cinema line camera also getting into 8K. But it's not quite there yet, it just does 4K up to 120. And the second thing would be that it doesn't have any internal ND filters. I mean, that's really a bummer because video shooters really find that feature very handy instead of, you know, having a matte box or, you know, screwing on ND filters in front of their lenses. I think they said that the camera body was just too small to make the internal ND work, but I feel like it would have been nice to have it in there and, you know, it would have justified the cinema name a little more. That's just my opinion. Now, is all of that worth the $38.99 US price tag? I mean, that's up to you to decide, but for me personally, I would not go out and buy this camera because I'm more of a hybrid shooter. I mean, I'm focused on video, but I still like to take pictures here and there, so an EVF is important for me, even though the FX3 can take pictures, but I would still prefer the EVF, and I'm saving $400. So in my case, I would definitely prefer the a7S III over the FX3. Now, if I was just focused on video and I already had an FX6, let's say, and I needed a B camera, then of course, absolutely, I would take the FX3 over the a7S III any day of the week. Now, if you're someone who's not really buying the FX3 or the a7S III, instead you just want to get the most out of your camera right now, then I recommend you check out this video here because I go over the best S-Log settings for your camera and how to get the most cinematic results. That's about it for me today, guys. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave it a like, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys next time.